Hey everyone, it's Dr. D'Artagnan Scorza. I am the Executive Director and founder of the Social Justice Learning Institute, a nonprofit organization whose work for the last 12 years has centered on building leaders of color who fight for equity and access in education, health, and in systems change. This November 3rd is the next fight we all have to show up and be prepared for. So, at SGLI, we've chosen to host a Get Out the Vote video with one of the most powerful women in American politics, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who in 2018 ranked in Time Magazine's top 100 list of the most influential people in the world. In that same year, she was elected to her 15th term in the U.S. House of Representatives, gaining more than 70% of the vote in the 43rd Congressional District here in California, which spans most communities in South Los Angeles. After more than 40 years of public service, she has gained a reputation of being a fearless and outspoken advocate for women, children, people of color, and those who are living in concentrated disadvantage. Our mission here today is to empower our communities, you, to use your voting rights and understand the power your vote holds. This requires increasing voter education around voting rights, how to cast a successful vote, measures and propositions that may be coming up on the ballot, and tips and tools on how to effectively avoid or navigate voter suppression tactics. Welcome, Congresswoman Maxine Waters.
Thank you very, very much. I'm pleased to be with you today, Dr. Scorza, and I want to thank you for the work that you do in our community, particularly working with young people in social justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Congresswoman. Let's go ahead and get started. So, more than 14 million Black and Brown people who are eligible to vote in 2016 either didn't register or were unable to show up to the polls, according to Pew Research. So, Congressman Waters, what's at stake this election, and how can we energize Black and Brown voters to get out and vote?
Well, thank you very much. This is one of the most consequential elections of our times, and it is extraordinarily important for Black and Brown people in particular to get out to vote. It is so important because many of the gains that we have made through civil rights movements, through sacrifices by those who were in the leadership of the civil rights movement, are threatened now. And so we have to not only get registered to vote, but we've got to show up to maintain the gains and to move forward. We're making this democracy what it should be and what it could be, and strengthening our democracy. And so I'm hoping that young people in particular will be inspired by what they have learned. Many of the young people had not experienced this kind of overt racism in their lifetime. And oftentimes they thought about the discussions that were being made about our history, about slavery, about the civil rights movement was passé, and that those times were over. But now I think they've been able to see close up the danger of racism. I think that, having seen that and experiencing that, many of them are going to be motivated in ways perhaps they have not been motivated since they became eligible for the vote. I think we're going to see a bigger and better turnout.
Well, thank you so much for that, Congresswoman. I think you really hit on a really important point, right? We're in the midst of a pandemic, and understanding that there are so many things this pandemic has laid bare in our society. The inequalities we've been dealing with historically as well, but this is a specifically important time in our history, especially given the election. And so we know that a lot of voters have concerns about going to the polls because of COVID-19, and there are even more who are concerned about vote by mail tampering. So how can our communities safely and successfully cast their votes in the face of all of this?
Well, first of all, every registered voter in the state of California will get a ballot. And this is a little bit different from what we've experienced in the past. We had what was known as absentee ballot, where you would request a ballot, but you don't have to request it now. You're going to get it. When you get that ballot, you have the opportunity to mark it up, according to what your wishes are, and send it back through the mail. That means that you can take it to the mailbox if any are left in your community. the blue boxes, or you can take it to the post office. Now, there is a way that you can allow someone else to do that for you, but you have to be careful. And one of the things we must remind our voters is you don't give your ballot to strangers. You don't give it to people that come and ask you to get that ballot, that they will help you to get it to the post office. You have to give permission, and that permission has to be documented for you to be given your ballot to someone to take it and mail it for you. The other thing is, aside from, vote by mail, there will be the traditional voting at the polls. And we know in many states there are suppression efforts where the lines are long, where people have been waiting for hours in order to vote, or there is intimidation, where people are being told by phone and in other ways that if you owe bills, if you have an outstanding warrant, a traffic warrant, if you vote, you're going to be detected and you may be arrested. That's going on. I don't think that's going on in California per se, but I do know that the lines are much too long, given the experience we have with voting at our polls. Many of our seniors do not want to take a chance because they think they must be protected with social distancing. I know that the polling places are supposed to be lined up in ways that will keep people 6 feet apart, but I think the concern that many people may have are concerns that should cause them to go ahead and do vote by mail. But our history is such that we're so proud, those of us who understand what poll taxes were all about, was being told to count the number of jelly beans in a jar was all about. We take great pride in going to the polls and getting our little sticker that said, I voted today, and people are gonna go. And many people will stand in line, even in the primary that we just had in March. When I visited the Inglewood City Hall, people were standing in line late into the night. The Church of God, right there on Crenshaw Boulevard, people were standing in line. We passed out water, etc., to help maintain them. And so people have to be committed to the proposition that they're going to be registered, they're going to vote, and they're going to get that vote counted either by sending it in the mail or going to the polling place to vote. Now, I have a little something extra I'd like to add here. There is an issue that has been emerged about voting boxes, being able to drop your ballot into a box. And we have discovered that the Republicans have what I call fake boxes, boxes that are not official. And we want people to know the difference between those. And if you are concerned about a ballot box, don't drop your ballot in it. Get it to the post office. Our Attorney General is working. He has sent out a cease and desist order, but I'm told they're saying they're going to continue to put down these boxes. And I want all of us to police what is going on in our community. If you see a box that doesn't have official on it, please call in to the registrar of voters or call your elected official. We want to get those boxes removed. We want to be responsible, and I don't think the registrar of voters has done enough to engage the community in looking out for box tampering. Let's all get our eyes open and know the difference between a fake box and a real box, and let's be prepared to call in your elected official, call the registrar of voters. Let's have all of our young people, as they move around, look out for these fake boxes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Congresswoman Waters. I hear you saying just very clearly, democracy is in our hands, right? We're responsible to make sure that we maintain the integrity of this election system, to make sure we're not putting our ballots out there in false boxes, right? I think there's been reports that they're actually marking them as quote unquote official, right? So we have to be vigilant. We have to be the ones that are out there paying attention. As we think about democracy and we think about what's on the ballot, there's a lot at stake. So can you talk about some of the ballot initiatives that you think are really important for us to pay attention to, and and maybe share a bit of detail about some of the
I
specific
need a list.
measures that you think could negatively or even positively impact our community?
Well, let me, think about some, and I'm asking someone to bring me uh, a list of those. But right off the top, let me tell you, there's one, I think it is Proposition J, where there is an opportunity that will be given, and I think this is under the County of Los Angeles, to ensure that we take steps to move away from incarceration and
Right.
indictments, I think, and give and open up an opportunity to apply resources toward doing everything that we can to give people an opportunity. Now, they're going to bring me a copy of this.
While you're doing that, Congressman, Measure J, for the benefit of those of you who are watching, is the Reimagine LA initiative.
Alternatives to incarceration, that's right.
That's right. The intention is to set
Go right
aside
ahead.
a portion of the county's budget to focus on youth development, to focus on alternatives to incarceration, to really invest in our communities. And so, Congresswoman, I hear you saying we should pay attention to Measure J. How about Proposition 16, which is the new ballot initiative to help repeal Proposition 209, which was the law that eliminated affirmative action in the state of California? What are your thoughts about Proposition 16 and the support that's been out there in the community for it?
Well, I am so proud of the Black Caucus, of the California State Assembly in particular, but, even the few that we have in the Senate for coming together and having the courage to do something that is so important to undo what California did by way of an initiative to keep us from implementing affirmative action. And I'm particularly focused on it because when I was in the California State Assembly, I opened up the opportunity for minorities and Black asset managers, uh, in particular, to be a part of managing the public employees' pension funds and the teachers' pension funds. And so we created an opportunity with an emerging fund that was kind of a set aside for these minorities who had not had the opportunity to be involved in the management of these tremendous assets of our personal employee funds. And so when the California initiative was put on the ballot, it undid what I was able to accomplish in getting Blacks in particular and Latinos in particular involved in managing these assets of the public employees' pension funds. And so I'm very pleased. Shirley Weber is doing a great job. She has a background and she hit the ground running when she went to Sacramento. She's in the leadership of this. And I am so proud of them. It is right on time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Congresswoman. Yeah, the work of Assemblymember Weber has been astounding and phenomenal. I think in many ways it's followed in the footsteps and the pathway that you laid, not only from your time in the Assembly, but also your time in Congress. And so I want to thank you for your leadership, helping to ensure that there was opportunity in contracting and procurement, right? A lot of people don't realize that when Proposition 209 passed, it meant that the state was unable to ensure that contracts to our community, right? So we often think about it as in terms of like race-based emissions, but it's never really been about quotas. Affirmative action has always been about providing equal opportunity and ensuring that everyone is at the same starting place in our society. So thank you for your hard work. So here's our final question for today. So given sort of the propositions that are out there, and folks, there are many propositions. There's one as well, Proposition 17, which will restore the right to vote for people who may have had felonies in our state. We know that there's a lot going out. And so we want people to also think critically about these candidates, propositions, and measures before them. So for example, please take some time to research who's funding these propositions and measures. Review the policies that many of these candidates have approved or brought forth to see where they stand on matters and issues to them. So Congresswoman, how would you encourage people to vet the candidates, these propositions, so that they actually make votes that are in the best interest, or cast their vote and cast their ballots in the best interest of people in our community?
Well, I think one of the things we're going to have to figure out how to get a handle on is who is proposing these propositions, who's making money on working to get these propositions on the ballot, who are the interest groups, and then how the issue is framed. Is it framed in such a way that people can understand it? I mean, there's a lot to do on the front end that our legislators really do have to pay attention to. In addition to that, the California ballots, are so full of propositions and initiatives. We've always got to do education to the best that we possibly can. That means that elected officials have to take some leadership in the way that they have to educate. We have to use our community organizations and our religious institutions and all of that to try and, explain what this proposition really is, who really benefits from it. Because the way that they are proposed by the special interest is so misleading. It's so tricky until people think that they're voting for the right thing, when in fact they're voting for just the opposite. So what I have done for years is I have a sample ballot that I send out, and my sample ballot basically makes recommendations, not only for elected officials, but for propositions on the ballot that we have researched. We research the judges. I interview judges before I support them. And I go through the propositions very carefully. And even some propositions that are considered harmful for elected officials to get involved with, I take it up if it's in the best interest of the people. One of those propositions on the ballot has to do with what is happening in our city governments with, talking about how you're going to deal with rent control.
Yes.
How are you going to deal with rent control? Now, here's what we know. We know that there is gentrification in some of our areas. We know that there's a housing crisis, and we know that there's, a lack of building fast enough, affordable housing. And so when we talk about homelessness, what we really need to talk about is for those people who are capable of becoming independent and getting off the street. It is oftentimes almost impossible for them to find a place to live that they can afford. And so, cities have been wrestling with this in different ways. There are some cities who want nothing to do with what is considered rent control. There are others who have had some kind of modified efforts to do something that approaches or looks like rent control. I believe that there should be the ability for our people to be treated in a way that would cause them to be able to have a safe and decent living at an affordable price.
That's
And
right.
if in fact, the cost of rental units keeps escalating, we've got to stop it. And we've got to have some way for people to have affordable and safe living. So that initiative on the ballot, I am supporting doing something about.
Thank
Yes.
you so much for that, Congressman. And for the benefit of our voters, Proposition 21. Here at the Social Justice Institute, we've been deeply committed to affordable housing and ensuring that all folk in our communities have access to a place to live, that they have the dignity of a home, or the dignity of a house, right? We want to make sure that we address houselessness, and that we ensure that many of our young folk who have faced homelessness, who are trying to complete their studies in school, who are working 2 or 3 jobs, who are traveling hours away just to get to their job, but they can live in the communities that they grew up in. That they're not facing housing burdens because income is not kept up with the cost of living here in our community. And so I want to thank you for your support for all of our families as we look to address housing. And thank you so much, Congressman, because we covered so much ground today. Now, as we think about our moment as we prepare to wrap up, I want our voters to know that you, the voter, that you count, that your vote counts, that many of our lives and our communities are at stake. And so, Congresswoman, do you have any final thoughts or any resources you'd like to share with our community members before we wrap up?
Well, my only thought is each of us must find a way that we can support our community voting as if their very lives depend on it. And really, that is the truth, that our lives really do depend on what we do with this election and what direction our government is going to go in. So I would ask that those who are able support the candidates of your choice, but the whole idea is to get out to vote. If you're concerned about these propositions, do something. contact a legislator, a candidate of your choice, offer to be involved in getting out the vote in ways that they will help design for you. For our younger people, we still need young people walking, and you can do this safely with your mask on. Stay 6 feet away from anybody's door. You can maybe just drop literature instead of going in doing, trying to find the registered voter and trying to determine whether or not they are at home and they're going to vote. Just drop some positive literature about getting out to vote. In addition to that, again, be watchdogs on what is happening. If you find people who need support in understanding the ballot, offer support to them. And if you need to call your elected official or to call the registrar of vote about anything that you see is happening, any questions that you have, do that, but get involved. And another thing that many of our people can do from home is you can have a candidate give you telephone call sheets and portable telephones, and you can sit in your home and dial and ask people to get out to vote. And that is something that our campaign is doing, and we want to make sure that other campaigns are doing it and people are available to do that. We need better, we can do better. And I think most people know that we can do better. So I ask people to get out with the interests of the democracy at heart and vote in ways that will strengthen our democracy, with candidates who care about strengthening our democracy, and vote and elect those who identify themselves in ways that absolutely show that that's what they're all about. So thank you for the opportunity.
It's been such a pleasure having you here today. I want to tell our voters and all of our watchers today and listeners, cast a vote you're confident in. Do your research, know your rights, vote early and safely, and listen to the Congresswoman's advice, because she has been such a source of wisdom for our communities for a while, and we know that her leadership has helped to improve conditions for all of us. Thank you again, Congresswoman Maxine Waters. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and to all of our folk that are listening out there, help get out the vote.